Good morning to everyone who will be watching this after the fact. This is a Bitcoin design community call that we're having this morning to discuss impact initiatives across the community in the coming year. I'm just started the call and waiting for people to join. My name is Matt.
Hey man, how you doing? Fine.
I'm good. Thank you, man. Good morning, Christoph. Hi, Nandini.
Good morning, good afternoon, good evening.
How you doing?
Good evening.
Nandini, you are in Canada?
No. I'm in India.
India, okay, cool.
Good morning, Johns.
What time is it in India right now?
8:30.
Okay, well, thanks for taking your evening, being here.
Thank you for taking your afternoon for being here, Christoph.
For you, anytime.
Good morning, Mo.
Good morning.
I'm gonna message real quick that we're starting the call.
Hey, Johns. Hey, Connor.
It's been so long I've done one of these. This is crazy. Feeling some like 2020s energy back. Connor,
In those old 2020s.
how's that knee going, Connor? I remember that was when
when I could move, when I could run. 5 years on and it's all downhill.
Look at us.
Definitely got a few grey hairs. I know that much.
I've already had this conversation with you. We can't talk about gray hairs in front of me. Good morning, David.
Morning, David. Hey, Nandini.
Hi, good morning. It's evening here, though.
Okay, all good.
Good evening, David. We'll give folks another minute or two. I also mentioned to Haley Burko, who's a colleague of mine at Spiral, that this call is happening and suggested she join us. So I think she'll be joining soon.
So what's everyone been Bitcoining today so far? Anything exciting going on?
Good morning, Haley.
Haley.
Nice to see your face, Haley.
Hey. Good to see you guys.
While we wait for folks, just in response to your question, Christoph, one exciting thing that's going on in kind of my corner, or our corner of the little Bitcoin world is yesterday we kicked off a bit of a public advocacy campaign around BIP 353.
Fun, so that.
Yeah, so we published a blog post about that, and we've also developed a slide deck that we plan to kind of take on the road and do some outreach to existing wallets and exchanges. And yesterday I presented that slide deck for the first time publicly at the Builder San Francisco meetup. And so it had a bit of its coming out party yesterday, which was fun. And so had some good questions, good discussion. People generally seemed excited about it. Most excitingly, there was a wallet developer in attendance, and he showed me the kind of early prototype of having implemented human Bitcoin addresses in his app. And actually, one of his questions was on the question of what to call it. And so he had come up with some name inside his app, which was his own version of human Bitcoin address, and definitely liked human Bitcoin address as naming better than what he had.
What was it? What did he come up with?
He called it Bitcoin payment address.
Mm.
Yeah.
But it was like a placeholder that he didn't love. And again, part of the whole point of, not the whole point, one of the points of the campaign is to drive some consistency across the industry about what these things are and how they can be used. And so every wallet developer having their own name for the thing seems decidedly antithetical to the end goal. So anyway, successful first presentation about human Bitcoin addresses, and actually the post on social media got a ton of attention, and generally, positive reception. Giacomo in particular, a big supporter of it, and he's a pretty tough customer in Bitcoin Twitter, and so to get the Giacomo blessing was a pretty big achievement.
Amazing.
Okay, I think we're at 5 minutes after 7. I'd like to begin. Let me present my screen, and we will do that.
Should we record? Or is
Oh
it
yes,
being
yeah,
recorded?
it is being recorded. Surprise!
It is being recorded. Yeah, I see it now.
Okay. If
Yeah.
everyone's not okay with being on here, maybe change your name, turn your camera off,
Exactly. Yeah,
or let us
because
know
that-
afterwards.
I,
We'll
I,
crop
I,
the-
I know that there are some people that wanted to be able to participate in this that were not able to. So people will be watching this after the talk. Okay. And if there's going to be noise in your background, please just mute your mic so that it's easier for everybody. For those of you, so I'd like to begin. So my name is Matt. For those of you that don't know me, I'm a product manager on the Spiral team. I work with Connor and Haley and Steve Lee at Spiral. Spiral helped kick off this design community several years ago, and here we are together all these years later. And the goal of today's call is to walk through a series of impactful initiatives that we as a design community are hoping to tackle in the coming year. And so let me just very briefly, let's see if I do this. Present. Yeah, so I just wanted to first set a little bit of context, and then what we'll do is we're going to walk through each of the proposed areas of initiative and have some conversation around them. We've already had there's already been some conversation around a lot of these projects in a Google document that I shared the other day with the community. So we can double click on each of those and some of the feedback that's already started rolling in, and then talk about next steps. So as I mentioned, the goal today is to talk about the areas of design work that we think are going to have the biggest impact on Bitcoin adoption in the coming year. And not just the coming year, because some of these projects are so big that I expect them to take multiple years. A lot of stuff in Bitcoin is fairly slow arcing, but we want the year ahead to see real traction developed against hopefully each of these areas if we can manage that. And some of you may have seen 2 or 3 months ago, we published a blog post about a forward-looking blog post about design work in Bitcoin, why we thought it was so important, and what we thought was our vision for that. And kind of central to the theme that we put out there was for having a bigger dent in the universe. How could design as a function, as a community, have a bigger impact both on Bitcoin and on the world? And so let's just talk about what impact looks like. Just 1 second. I just want to make sure that I'm admitting people as they come in. Let me just kind of flip back and forth a little bit. So what do we mean by bigger impact? So on the one hand, if we're going to have bigger impact, we need more people in the community contributing. As you'll see, we have a long list of projects to go through that we think are going to be impactful, and we don't have the bodies and the energy and the talent today to deliver against all of them. So part and parcel of these projects is thinking about how we're going to grow the community. How do we attract more amazing designers around the world that are very capable, that can help us deliver against all of these? So part of having impact is growing the community. But how do we grow the community? I think it's a bit of a self-referential thing, because part of growing the community is showing that we can have impact. So these things kind of go hand in hand. But again, at a high level, what does this look like? I think it's going to look like seeing the design community being out there more, being more influential, kind of being everywhere, being on social media, contributing to, maybe projects, GitHubs, finding more people, just being out there, building culture. I would love for the Bitcoin world to see and feel the appreciation for design and craft that we know exists in product building in general, but I don't necessarily see kind of within the Bitcoin space. And if we want to see that kind of appreciation of the craft of design, then I think it falls upon us, the design community, to be the flag bearers of that. So let's go bring everyone an appreciation of what great design in Bitcoin looks like, what it means. And part of the exercise that we've kicked off here and are wanting to to do as we look ahead is to try to focus our energy. There's literally, I was going to say thousands, surely it's an infinite number of things that we could be working on, but we want to make sure that to the extent that we have people that are coming into the community and want to work on things, that we're trying to focus that energy towards things that we've given some pre-thought to, that we think are going to be big, impactful areas. And so that's going to, what is that design work going to be? It's going to span brand work, product advocacy, and building and shaping and updating resources that we put out into the world. And the design community has already done a lot of that. And a lot of the work going forward is taking the starting point that we already have, which is great, and blowing it out. So that's really just the tee up for what we're going to walk through. So as I mentioned, we have this list of impact initiatives. The initial list was kind of seeded by us on the product side, or on the Spiral product team. Put our heads together, put out an initial list to a small number of people in the design community. Then we published it publicly for discussion, or we published it in the Bitcoin design community Discord for discussion. And our hope is hopefully late next week or early the following, before the holidays, to put this list out there to the world in a much more public way. And then next year to use it as something of an anchor that we can use as we do outreach to designers and point people towards, to say, like, look, this is the big, ambitious agenda that we have for Bitcoin design in the coming year, with some meat on the bones to help people understand what they could contribute to if they wanted to contribute to it. So the hope is to get that out. And so we've gathered a community call today to talk about all of these projects. So the version of the project list that we shared publicly in the Discord earlier this week was a big Google Doc. What I've done is I've taken each of those projects and moved them into slide form for this presentation, just to make it a little bit easier to parse. And what I've done, as you'll see, I've described briefly what each initiative area is. I've outlined what we've thought of as some target outcomes, because I'm trying to, and I'd love feedback on all of this, obviously, but be thoughtful about the type of outcomes that we want to drive with each of these initiatives. And what I've done on each of them as well is, there's been a lot of feedback and discussion in the Google Doc already. I've just moved over in very terse form some kind of reminders of some of the comments and feedback that's already taken place in the Google Doc, so that we can have more conversation about each of the areas. Before I proceed and start discussing each of the projects in turn, which we'll do for basically the rest of the call, did anyone have any questions or anything before we kind of dive into the meat of the matter?
All good. So far, so good.
Great. Let me just make sure there's no one in the waiting room waiting to come in. Okay. So this first one I've described as a design guide refresh. I'll just kind of briefly read it out, and then we can talk a little bit more about it. So the existing Bitcoin design guide content and navigation is a bit overwhelming. How can we simplify it, make it easier for builders to have their questions answered? Can we conduct some user interviews to discover pain points and inform the best way to focus the content and the way it's presented? The outcomes here would be more people visiting the design guide, more people talking about the design guide as a helpful resource. Really, in my mind, I think of this as, wouldn't it be great if the design guide was seen as the essential resource? If you're building in Bitcoin and you're not aware of what's in the design guide, then you're doing it wrong. Right? I would love for the design guide to be there. I suspect all of us would love that. And we have early signs that it can be super useful to people. And so there's been 5 years of content there. It's an amazing resource, but how can we make it even more essential, simpler? Some of the feedback that I've seen on the Google Doc to date, Christoph acknowledges that this is a very big project, and he's been so involved to date that changes and updates to it will almost necessarily involve him. Fully agree, and would love to have Christoph involved in this. I'm sure he has a lot of thinking already. Mo has mentioned that there's some user research that's already been conducted and documented, and so that would be a great starting point. We should reflect on, is more user research needed to inform us, or do we already know what needs to be done? It's just a matter of going and doing it. I think John's mentioned that we should have analytics on the design guide, which I think we have analytics, but if we have those analytics, we should certainly use that to inform changes that we want to make. I see, Christoph, you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yeah, we do have analytics. And I would also just say, for me being so deep into it, I would love to have some fresh brains, like a really public, open discussion, draw ideas from everywhere, really bring it in. Because sometimes when you're too close to it, you don't even see that anymore. And I'm sure everyone knows that little bit from something that they've worked on. Like sometimes you just need other people to just kind of drag you out. So don't feel like you need to be an absolute expert or whatever. All this, like, if the point is to make this easier for people to use and you're a newcomer, then like you can just say, well, this is not easy for me. And then we can figure out why and improve it.
Totally.
So,
New eyes,
everyone's welcome.
very, very welcome. Agree. Anyone else? John, did you have any follow-up?
I want to see those analytics first of all, but yeah, I definitely get the vibe of like new eyes, and that's kind of like part of the research as well. Like give feedback once you go through it. Yeah.
Great. So I consider this like, you know, one of the most important assets that the design community has produced. It should continue to be the most important asset that it has produced, and we should just make it awesome and better. So the thrust of this project. Bitcoin Builder Kit is a project that Stephen DeLorme, a friend of the community for many years, proposed and has already started working on. And the idea here is to make it easier for builders to build with actual code examples and components, to embrace AI and vibe coding in the way that new things are being built, make it easier to build new things quickly. And so this is kind of just a recognition that the world of design and building has changed around us. You know, it's so easy to vibe code things now. And to the extent that we're going to invite this new wave of builders into the Bitcoin application development ecosystem, we're going to have a lot of new things kind of spring to life. And we want those things. I think we as a design community and we as a world, we want those things that come to life to follow all of the UX best practice that we have as a community thought long and hard about. So how do we take all of the best practices that are in the guide and just make it very kind of like vibe codable, I guess? And so the idea of having code examples that are out there about how to bring this design to life is a great idea. And so Stephen has started work on this. There are lots of open questions. You know, can it even work? I don't know. You know, I think there's some early existence proof that it can work. So at the design week we held in San Francisco in September, already showed off an initial alpha version of this somewhat working. You know, I and he and others were doing some vibe coding against it, and it kind of basically works. And so he and some others are working on getting to a V1 release of the BBK, and that will be kind of an ongoing effort, I expect, as we move forward and have all this amazing content, and we want to think about how to make this best for AI. So I think this is 100% just to focus on some of the feedback. Yeah, lots of open questions. I think it definitely remains a worthy area of investigation. And if there are similar projects to BBK, I'd also love to contemplate those and to hear those. I know, Mo, I think you're enthusiastic about this one as well, as am I. So I'll be monitoring it, helping it. But to date, this is, you know, Stephen DeLorme kind of leading the charge. Mo, did you have anything more you wanted to share about this project?
I think just in general, encouraging the builder community to build more using AI is something I'm looking to dive more into in the next year. So I'm, you know, curious to be involved in this as well.
Great. Next area, we've described this one as highlighting best practices in the wild. And so here the idea is to kind of lean on real Bitcoin products and celebrate all of the best stuff, make teams that are doing great design work feel good and appreciate the love of the design community and hold up those real examples as design reference points to aspire to. So I just think that this is, you know, beyond kind of being prescriptive in the design guide about what design should be, as we find those examples in the world and maybe even examples of design, awesome design that go beyond the guide or suggest, like, we should be kind of just putting those out to the world and pointing to it, say like, this is what great design is, maybe even updating the design guide in response to it, but really just cheering. And this is part of, I think, culture building, you know, like let's show the Bitcoin world what great design actually looks like. And I think it's very much, you know, part of design practice. If you're a designer designing things, where do you go to get inspired by, to get inspiration? Where do you go? You look at what's in the market. What are other designers doing, right? That's just even more so than looking at a guide to be told what to do. You're looking at what other designers are doing. And so part of us guiding the way forward, I think, needs to be doing that kind of like peer-to-peer reference point. thing. And Eric mentioned, I'm not sure if Eric joined the call or not, but he mentioned something called UX Bytes. And it's a newsletter, I think, that does this in very kind of like small bite-sized forms, you know, allows people to kind of contribute and to show off examples of amazing UX. And so that's maybe something that we can contemplate for the community, even volunteer to help do that. So, sorry, I'm just seeing, okay, we have a raised hand. Johns, did you want to go?
Yeah. Thanks. Let me put my hand down. Ooh, was tired. With regards to best practices, are we looking strictly at apps that are within the ecosystem currently, or are we looking at kind of like, oh, you know, maybe I'm drawing inspiration from an Apple Pay or a Revolut, or, you know, whatever new challenger bank is coming up or something like that in fiat world.
I think it's a good question, Johns. I don't, you know, I think I'd love to hear from others, but I don't have a strong opinion on the matter. I think whoever's leading the charge on this initiative should kind of like think about that, discuss it a little bit more. My off the cuff opinion is that we should look for great design practice in general that is inspirational, because I don't think that Bitcoiners have all the answers. I think that we as a community want to draw inspiration from outside, and then if to the extent that we can find those amazing examples that we think light the way forward, then we kind of push those out to the Bitcoin design world. Again, you know, like the Bitcoin community in general isn't tuned into design. So if the design community isn't the one that's tuned into the design world, then who is going to be doing that? Like, if not us, who? It's kind of my question in the back of my mind for a lot of these things. So I feel like it's up to us.
Okay, and the application of that highlight becomes kind of like whatever the responsible person is in that case, right? Whether it's video, whatever, website.
Whatever, format, tooling, how it gets out there. But, you know, a theme across a lot of these, I think maybe we'll talk about social media more specifically in a moment, but is like to be much more public about all of the thinking coming out of the design community. Like, the Discord is great. We need the Discord as a community to kind of manage ourselves and, you know, be a space for us. But like, I'd love for, you know, the community to break out of the Discord in a big way and into the public sphere. And so, you know, whatever's going on here, like the point would be showing the way forward. So like that has to get out to the world somehow. And we're not going to figure it out on this call, but I'm sure there's a way to do that. Great. Let's keep rocking. The next impact initiative is something that I've called BIP design. So for those of you on this call that are not familiar, BIP stands for Bitcoin Improvement Proposal. It's how kind of ideas move their way through kind of Bitcoin development from its earliest stages. So for instance, an engineer or researcher has an idea for something that they think should exist in Bitcoin. They describe it in a very kind of like specific formatted way in a lot of detail and depth. So there's a whole kind of like spec basically for how a BIP is articulated, usually in text form. And then that's shared with the Bitcoin mailing list, shared with on Delving Bitcoin other forums for consideration and discussion by the community. And then there's a consensus building process around that BIP that takes many months at minimum, many cases years for BIPs to gain consensus. And then they, you know, there'll be, if rough consensus is built around the BIP, then a reference implementation is proposed, and then eventually that gets kind of like built into tested code and then ships as code, right? So this is kind of like how things happen in actual like Bitcoin open source development. And I've been, you know, kind of lurking on the Bitcoin development list for many, many years. But what I basically never see is design as part of BIPs being proposed. And, you know, Christoph mentions, you know, BIP 353, and there's some other examples that have been brought to the fore where designers have inserted themselves, you know, at some point in this, at some stage in the process. And I think like when design does insert itself in the examples that we have, then things move faster and better. And so my thought with proposing this kind of initiative area is let's see more of that. Like, let's make it more possible for designers to know about BIPs that are coming to light. Let's make it more possible for the engineers and researchers working on Bitcoin to know that designers are out there and actively able to help them communicate their ideas and show the vision forward. You know, like I think I mentioned, I didn't actually read the text of this, so I'll just take a moment just to read the text that I put out there. The design community helps for this, devs communicate the user value of BIPs early in the product lifecycle. It's a very early stage in the product lifecycle, but it could greatly help for visibility, respect in the community, and impact. Mirrors traditional product building involving design from very early on to help influence the whole process. And so my comment there is that, you know, I used to be at Google, and I even have worked in startups, including my own startups. But whenever I've done product development elsewhere, there's been this kind of like trifecta of product building involving design, engineering, and product from the earliest stages. And that way everybody is on the same page about what's being developed and everyone is contributing in different capacities. And so I would love to see design kind of like pulled way forward in the product development pipeline, and help, you know, the Bitcoin world kind of like just almost literally in some cases see what these BIPs could lead to, right? So like, oh, a new BIP is proposed. Let's fast forward 7 years and imagine that this has been adopted in wallets. What does this look like? What does the user value look like? And that would help, I think, the world kind of come to consensus faster in either direction. Like either, yes, this is obviously good or not. It's a little bit striking to me that basically the only medium that Bitcoin has used to date to do this kind of consensus building has been text. Like, what about everything in the design toolkit? It's like it stands at the ready and able to help. And so I would love to see that happen. I think it's a very dramatically kind of like underexplored area. And the way that this, you know, so this is about kind of like process building. It's about thinking about how we bring people together. I'm not sure how this happens, but I just feel like if we could make it happen, it would have huge impact. Johns, your hand is up. Would you like to go?
Yeah, I think the process of BIPs itself seems kind of like a bit scary. It's like something that only a developer needs to be proposing or whatever, and also that the designer kind of is playing second fiddle to them or partners to them. But there is also a large opportunity for completely design-led BIPs, right? So you could think of, for example, some piece of functionality that you observe in wallets. It can be like a certain file type. Everyone knows about different file types and stuff, of like the metadata inside of a wallet, or a contact list, or whatever else it is. And you can think about like, well, how could it be easy to export from one place to another? You know, how could that process look like? What should the interface be? And I think those are some things that I personally would like to see, and wish if I kind of like understood that as a designer, I do have permission to write one of these documents and kind of like propose in this format. Yeah. And you know, what's the worst that can happen? Like it just doesn't get adopted, which like, okay, cool. But you know, you can still go through that process. And if you have an idea of how to improve a user experience, and you think that this is something that should be done across the board, I think, I would highly encourage like designers to not just wait for the developers to give you space.
100% agree. Yashra, I see you have your hand up. We'll go to you in a moment. But just in response to that, I 100% agree. And you know, like the truth of the matter is with BIPs is like literally anyone can propose one, right? Like this is open source. Literally, like there's and this is why the process is documented. If you want to propose a BIP, this is the sections it needs to have. This is the level of detail that's expected. And so literally anyone can do that, certainly including designers. And there is actually good precedent for that recently, relatively recently, where we have BIP 177, which was proposed by John Carvalho, a BIP that I've become a big proponent of as well, and have, you know, thrown some energy into advocating for, and we're seeing like actually really strong wallet adoption, right? And I remember when BIP 177 was published, it was you know, a little bit controversial. You know, like, does this even belong in a BIP? And you know, John is of them. You know, like I love, you know, John. You know, John, very divisive figure in Bitcoin, but I just love that he just fucking goes out and does it. Right? He put it out there, and it worked. It worked. It got the conversation started. It laid out a very detailed proposal, and now we're seeing the implementation of it. So, like, I think actually BIP 77 is a pretty good kind of not template, but a good existence proof that this can happen, be influential, have real impact on Bitcoin. And so, I'd love to see more of those type of design and end product led BIPs. Go ahead, John. So it looks like you want to follow up.
Yeah. Just quickly to that, I think that's you're definitely right. John's process throughout this, and in terms of the marketing, engagement, campaigning and stuff. Any designer looking to like do something similar and have that kind of impact should like study that as a playbook and even document it perhaps, because it's not just like, okay, I'm going to write this document, I'm going to like try to become technical now. No. Like design was also used. A very beautiful marketing website was out there. Networking, talking to people, going to conferences, presenting yourself, giving yourself a platform. I think that's also important.
I think documenting those best practices and examples a great idea. And I'll just make the final point, and then we should move on to the others of these projects because we have still a long list ahead of us. But I've noticed that this applies to, I think, anything happening in Bitcoin, including how we would think about design being used. I've noticed that BIPs are more likely to garner consensus and move forward as you have more people contributing to them. If a BIP is just a one-person show, then it doesn't, it is seen as a one-person show, and it doesn't necessarily move forward. And so, like, for instance, with John's BIP, like, he got involved, and then at some point there was like, I almost kind of felt like a passing of the torch where like I took it and some others took it and Steve and others were running with it. And so then it's like, oh, this isn't just a John thing. There's actually, and then there was like a designer, Michael from Hash App, who was also separately and independently passionate about it. So like, as you see these kind of like independent points of consensus coming together, it's powerful for the community. And is helpful. So that's why I think more designers inserting themselves just help with this consensus building process. It's like, if you agree with something, make it known that you agree with it, help marshal it forward, and then you help with the consensus building. Anyhow, let's not spend too much time on this. If anyone's going to lead the charge here, I'm happy to contribute to this. It's an area I think can have a ton of impact. The next one's an area around design advocacy. I mentioned at the top of this call that I think a theme for how we have impact out in the world is to be more out there. And so I'd love to, or this whole impact initiative is around presence on social media. So let me just quickly run through what we've said, and we can talk a little bit more about it. So I think we should start up a regular presence on X that engages the Bitcoin product building community at large with design topics, advocacy, debate, design crit, and more. A podcast or regular spaces or regular content coming out that all builders will see and amplify and value. Something a bit provocative that gets attention. And Christoph and I during Design Week had a little bit of conversation about the word provoke. I like to use the word provoke. I like to be a little bit provocative. I like ideas that are provocative because it's almost like, to me, the connotation of provocation is entirely positive, because provoking kind of like presumes in the word that someone's going to respond to it in some way. So you put something out there that expects a response, you garner that response, and it's the start of engagement, and then going from there. So I'd love to see the design community to find those ideas and even express them in ways that are designed to be provocative, designed for engagement. I know that Mo and Yashraj have indicated some interest in this in the comments in the doc. What would impact look like? It would look like actually like having a much larger audience on social media, spreading awareness of good design practices and design culture. But really, this comes back, really, this is like a culture building initiative, right? It comes, for better or worse, a lot of the conversation in Bitcoin development, a lot of the consensus building is taking place on social media, for better or worse. You can just like observe the world and acknowledge that. And a lot of that is on X. And so I feel like the design community needs to play on X at that frontier. And it is certainly not the case that every designer needs to do this. Every designer does not want to do this, not good at doing this. But to the extent that we have people in the community today that are able and willing and want to do this, we absolutely should. And to the extent that we're growing our community, we should be looking for people that are good and able and love this stuff. Because there's a lot of people actually out there that do love this stuff. And so let's find them. Let's give them the microphone and let's have them, champion design everywhere. Let's go. So that's this project. I think, like being impactful is kind of like baked into the notion here. Is like, if you want to be impactful, you have to be out there and have to do it, quite publicly. That's social media. Next thing, it's another. The label here is design advocacy. I think it goes a little bit beyond advocacy because I think there's actually a lot of building to be done here. Let me just kind of describe in a little bit more detail what I talked about. I know that John's will have some thinking here as well. He's done a lot of work in this space. We can brainstorm it a little bit, but like I've labeled the area of building new things on Bitcoin. Before I come in on this, I just want to look at the I haven't been paying attention to the chat. I see there's lots of stuff in the chat. Provoke inspiration. But yes, that's good. That's almost another advocacy thing. Also in Instagram, Johns, you mentioned Instagram. Although a lot of Bitcoiners aren't on there, tons of creatives are on Instagram. That's a great point. I personally am not on Instagram. I would love to find, and in fact, we've had this conversation a little bit on the Spiral team. So the Spiral team also not super active on Instagram to date, but the Spiral team has started an Instagram account and is trying to put out more content on Instagram. But I feel like Instagram is an entirely unexplored space where designers play that, and we should be active there. So, to the extent that anyone on this call is an Instagram wizard, is plugged in, let's figure out a design presence on Instagram. I would love it. Okay, but coming back to building new things in Bitcoin. So I think what we need to do is kind of like show the way forward with experimenting with new ways to use Bitcoin in applications, demonstrate how easy it is, showcase new ideas that could tap new demand for Bitcoin, like micropayments, and I'm sure there's lots of things that inspire others to do the same. Create a movement. And like, I'm not sure exactly what this movement looks like, but like maybe it's like an app showcase or sub community for doing new things with new money. It's kind of like the theme. And I'll pass the mic to Johns in a moment because he's commented on the doc, and I'm sure most people in this community, or many people in this community, will be familiar that he's kind of like taken a run at doing this in the past already. Sorry, one moment. My son is trying to call me from home. But I think it's always been true, but it's especially true now that there's like this like amazing frontier of new things that can be built with the idea of transferring small amounts of value, permissionlessly, borderlessly, without identity. Right? Like it's like Bitcoin as a new primitive in application development is like, I think, staggering and new, and the world dramatically underappreciates it. And like, I think what we want to do is just like, let's make developers around the world aware that this is now possible. And so like, what might you build, right? It was kind of like the message. And for a long time, it was maybe too early for this because the tooling infrastructure was just like hard in Bitcoin to like spin up a node and like to make it build an app. It was just hard. You could do it, but you had to be super motivated to do it. And just in coding in general, you had to have some expertise to know how to code. But now you don't need to code anymore. The world is so changed, with vibe coding. And if we just think about like where we are, like the word vibe coding at this time last year did not exist. The word was coined by Andrej Karpathy in February of this year. I first vibe coded in April of this year. And, I haven't stopped since, I've become a vibe coding monster. I think everybody's going to become a vibe coding monster because it is now trivially easy to bring to life any idea that you have. And so I think we're about to like have this, we're just vibing. I think that we're going to have this new world, this new wave of builders coming into the world that are building, and like, well, let's equip all of these, vibe coders and developers in general with, Bitcoin as this primitive to see what can be built, what can be remixed. And the reason that I have this kind of like as an area for the design community to think about is like, and I use the word kind of like tapping new demand or identifying new demand. I almost think of us as like explorers, putting our explorer hat on and go explore. Like, can we figure out what is at this frontier? Can we unlock new use cases that the world hasn't thought about? Find new sources of demand, and then to the extent that we can find that, then we use that to show the world we are not likely to be the people that are going to create the giant new application, the product that is going to get 100 million users. We like, because it's just a numbers game. But like, we can do the work to help 1,000 flowers bloom, 1,000,000 flowers bloom, and someone else will do that. And so I think our role is to help light the way forward, excite the community in the right way. Johns, you spent a lot of time doing this. You had Bolt.fun. Maybe it's worth just taking a minute to recapitulate Bolt.fun and maybe your own reflections for the way forward with this, because I think you remain actively interested.
Yeah. So for the back in 2021, when Nostr was hardly a thing, when people were still trying to understand, people in the design community, us even, writing the guide and stuff like that, we're trying to like still kind of like understand some of the nuances of the technology itself before the guide even. We launched this thing called Bolt.fun. It was a repository of information, but it kind of sat in between technology, like the course specifications, and what a front-end end user application could be. So the guide is more of a kind of more end user kind of a piece of content. This project started to grow along those lines, and what we were trying to do is to bring in the builder, the technologist, those hardcore engineers, and the designer, and let them kind of play in the middle, right? Play with all these little pieces of the spec, and to make things come out of it, right? To put them together, because what was happening is like people look at Bitcoin and say like, well, the only thing that you can do is build a wallet, build a wallet, build a wallet. And then now we have things like Stacker News, which ended up launching, right? We have all what's going on with zapping in the Nostr ecosystem. But still, there's like a bunch of small pieces of technology that aren't being kind of appreciated and experimented with, and interfaces that could just be for those simple things, or a bunch of those things put together. And what happens there? You know, what happens when you put these multiple pieces of technologies together? The great thing now is that a lot of the stack with the vibe coding, it's very easy to use web technologies. That's kind of like the default. You know, you could use Figma Make, or you know, Google AI Studio, which I'm really using, is pretty good. You know, or ChatGPT, and you could preview it in a browser as a designer. You don't need to install something on your machine and stuff, and you could see it right there in the browser. Bolt.new even, right? And so now what that puts us in is, you know, you go through the guide, you start looking at like, okay, what are all those pieces that are documented? How can I combine them together? And I think that itself can be events. That can be, you know, a monthly ideation, brainstorming, vibe coding kind of a workshop that everyone like huddle, that everyone comes together and just explores these things. Now is the time for the visionaries, the idea person, the designer especially, to kind of just be massively creative. So I would definitely encourage whoever to carry on that carry that torch, and, you know, make things fun, make things exciting. Fun is about accessibility. Fun is about just playing. And I think whilst we play, you never know, you know, what comes out of it in the end.
100% agree. You mentioned the word fun. I see Mo's face lighting up a little bit. She's all about the fun as well in the community and the vibe coding. So I just think this is a very big area. Homework's been done. It's a new world. Let's go explore it. I will be doing I'll be pretty active helping marshal us forward, but I think I maybe mentioned off the top, but like each of these impact initiatives, I think there can be several projects running in parallel for each. And so like, let's go do lots of work to explore each of these, including this one. All right, next area of investigation, Bitcoin versus stablecoins. So here the blurb is also show the way forward by exploring why and how Bitcoin may provide unique value over stablecoins or traditional finance, identifying the use cases, user stories, amplify the messages, build excitement and prototypes. And so the reason I put this in here is that I think stablecoins, you know, I mean, I'll say are coming in a big way or have already arrived, and in many cases compete with some of the use cases that Bitcoin might be used for. And I think if Bitcoin as a community is not careful, if we're not good at articulating to the world of builders and describing the value proposition, what makes Bitcoin unique, someone coming into the community that has a particular use case might, you know, gravitate towards stablecoin land or altcoin land or other thing land, and build on top if it seemingly meets their need, but maybe in subtle ways is inappropriate or sets up weird trust models and, you know, things that maybe not, you know, are not very Bitcoin principled for all the reasons that we know and love. And so here, the idea for this area would just be to acknowledge that stablecoins are a thing, and they're going to like stand alongside Bitcoin, and that we can use design to, like, I think of this as almost kind of like it is under the advocacy bucket, but also education. So how and where are these things different? But how does Bitcoin kind of like pull itself away from stablecoins, and why should it be seen, and where should it be seen as the thing to build on? And I think we can just, you know, we can think about that. We can do that work out in the world. So it's advocacy work. You know, maybe there's a website that spins up. Maybe it's like material that are put out there. Maybe it's somehow influencing the AI coding agents and, you know, tipping them towards Bitcoin and helping the AI agents also understand how these two things go together. It's also, you know, the Bucket prior to this about building new things on Bucket was all about experimentation. And so I also view this as experimentation, and experimentation that I want to do more of as well. Anytime that, you know, I even build an application using Bitcoin, I think in the back of my mind, you know, could I have used stablecoins for this? Maybe I should have. Maybe I should build the same thing with stablecoins and run them in parallel and see how they're different and experiment with that boundary myself, to myself understand in practical terms how these two things go hand in hand. You know, is it the case that stablecoins require you know, KYC, or, you know, when do they or don't they? When does Bitcoin and not, right? So I would just, you know, are there like cost or fee implications? Is there scalability or speed, you know, differences between how fast you can transact stablecoins versus Bitcoin? I don't really know the answer to those, but I think we're only going to get to those answers by experimenting more. So that's the overall bucket. There's a few people with their hands up. Let's go, Nandini, your hand is up.
Yeah, I just wanted to understand that you are suggesting that in future we might be building products that includes both Bitcoin and stablecoin. Is it something that to be kept in mind for the, let's say, Bitcoin new projects that you mentioned before?
That's a good question. You know, like what I've articulated so far at a high level with this is just kind of, let's understand the boundary between Bitcoin and stablecoins, how they are, relatively better or worse than one another. But you make a good point that in many cases, stablecoins and Bitcoin are going to live alongside one another in products. You know, like for instance, like Spark Wallet, Spark now supports stablecoins, and so it's going to be very natural for stablecoins to be alongside Bitcoin. WDK, the new wallet development kit from Tether, also puts stablecoins and Bitcoin alongside one another. And so, yeah, we as a design community should be thinking about how these two things not even like live as separate technologies and separate products, but come together inside products, and how we think about that. So the design patterns for, you know, sharing the not sharing the rails, but like having these two rails sharing UI and product and user mindshare is very much part of this, in my opinion. So it's a good call out, and I think I'm going to update the text to even reflect that. Christoph with a comment. There's some ways to stabilize Bitcoin against dollar value with other types of tokens mostly used today. That's right. Yeah, there's user stable channel. There's stable channels, for instance, is like one of the startups at Presidio Bitcoin doing an approach like this as well. Connor, as we spoke, ownership's one of the critical nucleus cultural properties of someone who's a Bitcoiner. Yeah, yeah. Great chats or great comments in the chat. I want to be mindful of the time. We have 15 minutes left and still a number of projects to run through, so I'm going to keep moving. The next one's Reference Wallet. This is maybe one of the biggest, most important, you know, projects, and I think we as a community have long hoped that all of the guidance in the design guide would manifest itself or show up in, like someone would go and build the perfect wallet, you know, that takes all of the incredible UX guidance and just lays it out, and it would just then become obvious to the world, like, yes, this is definitively the most amazing wallet that has ever been built. We're not there yet. You know, there's various wallets that are out there that are better or worse. I feel like none of them kind of, you know, do a super great job of implementing all of the guidance in the design guide. You know, Phoenix maybe, you know, leading the way in some respects, but not all. And yet there are some projects that have started, you know, in this direction. So there's the Monday project that Matthew Ramsden's, you know, started and leading on iOS that, you know, goes some way towards this, but, you know, one way forward for this overall bucket would be to kind of blow that out. Christoph himself has done a lot of work with Core over the past year, maybe even multiple years. And he's more recently, you know, been exploring Arc and, you know, taking everything in the design guide and applying it to building a great Arc wallet. So I think those are projects kind of that I would consider under this umbrella as well. But the hope, you know, would be like, yes, let's have like a complete reference design, but the idea is like, let's find the right people for this to actually come to market. How could this actually exist? Can we be a force, part of the project, part of coming together, a wallet that is actually in the hands of tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, and millions of users? You know, it's a reference wallet that's come out of the design community. Let me just catch up on the comments. Maybe this is one of the projects that the culture aspects need to be reinforced in these projects. Yes, Christoph, points to some links in the chat to the core app, the work he's done there. Points out AI coding is a superpower. I think he's using AI coding heavily in his Arc wallet designs. Arc, yes, Arc. So yeah, I'm not going to say a lot more here unless someone wants to chime in. Like, this is just, this is the practical manifestation of so much of the design work. And at the end of the day, influence, we can be as influential as we want in text on the web, in designs, even on social media. But at the end of the day, the thing that's going to be most influential is products shipping in market with distribution that gets usage and eyeballs. Ultimately, that everything that we do needs to bake into that. So to the extent that we can help, be a force that brings such a wallet to life, that's great. Exactly. Okay. BIP 177 and beyond. I won't spend a lot of time on this. We've already talked about it a ton, but it's an example of using design and the BIP process to move forward an agenda. And I will remain involved, and I hope other people even get involved for moving this one forward, because I don't think that this project stops at just annotating Bitcoin quantities in UIs. I think it is also like, how do we type, once we have the Bitcoin symbol in quantities, then the question is, how do we type the Bitcoin symbol easily on keyboards? So it's like, okay, that's going to start, like where should it be on keyboards? Let's do some work with hardware manufacturers, to actually start that process. It's going to be a multi-year process, right? So I mentioned that a lot of things in Bitcoin take a lot of time. Then, so let's start these long arcing things now. So this is one that's near and dear to my heart. Oh, go ahead, Johns.
I was just about to say, maybe even have chats with custom keyboards are becoming quite popular now. Like these mechanical clickety-click ASMR keyboards, reaching out to some of those folks, getting them to include it in one of their buttons and stuff like that, campaigns around their, hardware side.
Great idea.
Why not?
Yeah, great idea. Love it. The next, and we don't have to talk about a bunch, I already talked a little bit about it prior to the call starting, actually, but Human Bitcoin Address, which is our name for BIP 353. In the presentation, and I'll share the slide deck, I think, with the world, or we had the blog post went out yesterday, so it contains all the same content, but we described this as one of the most, if not the most important UX question in Bitcoin. So the very top level surface area of how we communicate sending Bitcoin to one another, has traditionally been quite bad, and BIP 353 is a very user-friendly solution, much like the way we type web addresses into browsers, uses DNS under the hood. And so we're kicking off a bit of an advocacy campaign on the Spiral side, and we would love more help to move that agenda forward. It's going to take many years to do this advocacy. So this is an important one. Again, I'll be involved in helping move this forward. I love helping doing this. This next bucket is about layer 2 consistency. I'll read the text that I wrote and we can discuss it. So as new L2s proliferate, so I would love to see the design community advocate for simplicity and consistency, ensuring that Bitcoin remains the central asset with respect to L2s and having them fade away. Yet, there's an interesting yet, and this is the design tension, yet making sure that the trust assumptions are clear and well understood for these various L2s. And so this includes making sure that, Lightning language and branding kind of disappears, as well as, Arc and Spark all kind of disappear from user-facing awareness. And it is like the natural way of things for these projects to spin up. L2s, it's just natural. They spin up and they want to be communicated and understood as being something different. And then eventually those brands somehow end up manifesting in UIs. And I think that we, the design community, need to be the I don't want to use the word gatekeepers, but champions for remembering that at the end of the day, the user just wants to have and send Bitcoin. And so let's make sure that they don't need to understand, 5 different layer 2 technologies, 10 different layer 2 technologies, and how they're all subtly different and what all the brands mean. But at the end of the day, this is about moving Bitcoin around the world. And so having the design community just being that, voice of consistency and simplicity, identifying and calling out, wallets and projects when that's not the case, and just helping drive us towards only Bitcoin is a valuable force in the ecosystem. And so I put that at our responsibility, and we should do that. John says, I have a bunch of writing on this topic, which I'm happy to dig up and share if anyone find that useful. Great. I'd love to read it, so please share. User story bank. Okay, this one here. The idea is that we should document real user stories, and not just kind of like composite personas, assembled from real user stories, but actual real user stories from around the world in a digestible, searchable, and useful way. Make it easy to find documented, inspiring evidence, sourced data that can be cited by media to highlight the reality of different types of Bitcoin adoption around the world with a focus on all the positive uses. So from the comments, I think there's a lot of enthusiasm from this, especially with Mo, very consistent with a lot of the work that you've been doing, and I know that you want to do and would be very capable of doing. But I just have the sense that if part of the problem that Bitcoin has a poor brand in the world, then part of creating this new brand identity is going to be sourced from the real world user stories, and so we just need to find a way to amplify them, and that will show up in some of the branding work, and which we'll talk about quickly in a moment. But this needs a source, right? So this I view as a foundational layer for a lot of the other work that will happen on Bitcoin. This is information gathering, but then it's also storytelling out to the world. How is Bitcoin used in all of these unexpected ways, counterintuitive ways that would resonate with people who maybe think of themselves as not on board with Bitcoin, progressives, a lot of progressive people and I've just experienced this. Was it yesterday or the day before? I went around San Francisco to try to convince some merchants to accept Bitcoin. And I was surprised at the negativity that we received with Bitcoin, with some merchants who were using Square, and including some merchants were so negative about Bitcoin, they didn't even care about saving on credit card fees. It's just so puzzling to me. Anyway, so it strikes me that it's still early days. People misunderstand, misappreciate, or don't appreciate how Bitcoin can be valuable around the world in ways that are not necessarily obvious to them. So this is a ton of, This can provide a ton of value. Mo, is there anything that you want to chime in?
I'm particularly excited about leading this one because I ironically had this idea myself a year ago, super excited about it. And I've spoken to a few people and they're also very excited about because the thing is we have tons of research reports about personas and this and that. And these research reports sit online 70 pages, 50 pages. No one reads these reports because they're not human enough. And I think we need to bring a human face to Bitcoin that is not data and personas, just real life. This is this person in this village using Bitcoin. And I believe that that's going to inspire people who have the fear around using Bitcoin, which is a huge psychological barrier that I've heard many times since interviewing people. I think we just be like, oh, look, there's another person who's using it, who's also a native English speaker. Look, this is how they used it. So I'm really excited to get started with this one. Yeah.
Yeah, I love your term, kind of humans of Bitcoin. And this project or this initiative area is so interesting to me because I think it blends so much. It blends research, it blends design, it blends also, frankly, I think there's almost a need for journalism here a little bit. So I think we need to find some writers, some people who have done this work, know how to kind of storytell. So I'm very excited about what might happen here.
Same.
Next area, routing and tooling. So I think we can and should improve how we funnel users coming to the Bitcoin design community, how we communicate, how they can help the community and how the community can help them, how they participate, contribute to the community priorities, like this list of projects. I think we can do work to focus the Discord into a smaller number of channels and help people navigate the Discord. We should also not feel limited to the Discord or limited to GitHub and the existing set of tools that we have available. I think we should just continue to further, let's use the best tools for the job. Let's also, one of the things that I put here is about, can we create a bit of a culture of customer support in the Bitcoin design community, where if someone has a design question, we've kind of optimized the community tooling, community itself for helping people get those questions answered. And maybe that will involve tooling and will involve AI to some degree, but is there some way for people to very easily kind of escalate a design question to a human being at the end of the day, and a human being gets back to them? I think we could figure that out as a design community, and it would be useful for everybody. And I think that I saw in the comments, in the document, there's, I think, generally enthusiasm for doing more here and continuing to shift towards a kind of customer service mentality. Let's move on. We don't have a ton of time left. Actually, most of the projects that remain in the list are brand and marketing projects. And I guess I'll spend a moment now just talking about kind of why the brand and marketing projects are even in this list. One is that I think that if we, there's a number of ways of answering this question, but one is if we want to grow the design community itself, I mentioned earlier in my comments that I think Bitcoin suffers this kind of brand problem in general. So designers who are not yet into Bitcoin, may exist in this kind of like broader design culture that, is either not interested or maybe even actively disinterested in Bitcoin. And so if the design community is, in general, is actively disinterested in Bitcoin, how are we going to grow the design community? And so like, I think we need to heal and blow out and create this like much more inspiring brand for Bitcoin out in the world. And that includes so that, reaching the design community to pull them in. But it's not just the design community that we want to target with the branding work. It's really the world at large. And so there should be some work that is taking place to inspire and storytell and do brand work for the world at large. But we also should do work that is more scoped and targeted to different constituencies within that audience, like in this case, merchants, and on subsequent slides I have savers and spenders. So every one of these, audiences are going to have different use cases, stories, different messages are going to resonate in different ways. But I put merchants here, and I mentioned in my comments on the slide, like the Bitcoin merchant community that we recently put together with Spiral, I think could be an interesting example for how we created a new brand out of nowhere. Like the Bitcoin merchant community, like 1 month ago did not exist. It wasn't a thing, but like we created this thing. It's now an entity. It has a brand. It has a story. It becomes a platform or a mouthpiece for a message that can be brought to market, like avoid credit card feeds. And that message is very simple and focused. And we put a lot of thought into a focused message. We put a lot of thought into the initial assets for this, but the Bitcoin merchant community itself is a project that now needs to live on, and we, can be improved and blown out. And so there's a lot of brand and marketing work to be done just on that project. And there's many other projects that could spin up for merchants. And I also think about brand design and the brand design world as a set of designers that we haven't really kind of handed the baton to in Bitcoin. We haven't done a lot of outreach to those designers. And like, I think it's a set of designers that can be very capable, a set of work that can be very powerful, that once they come into the community, then they could become inspired by other things. So if we pull in brand designers, a new type of designer that comes into Bitcoin, then they get inspired and they end up contributing to product work. And then you have a product designers who are out there who maybe are not brand designers, but are very moved by good design. And if they see that the design of Bitcoin in general is improving, then they will become inspired. So I just think that all of these brand projects, and now we're kind of running out of time, so I don't want to necessarily run through all of them, but like each of them could benefit from brand design and also marketing, because those two things often go hand in hand. And so this talks about all of the audiences that I talked about. Regulators is another audience. For instance, on the regulation front, Block recently put together a project, a brand and marketing project in Washington, DC, to try to advocate policymakers to have a de minimis exemption that would not require you to pay capital gains on small transactions, right? So like that's an obvious thing that needs to happen in America and around the world to encourage Bitcoin spending. And fortunately, like Block is, putting the muscle into doing this. But like we as a design community could also have similar campaigns to do this and blow them out. And at the end of the day, a lot of these brand campaigns, I think it was Stephen DeLorme's feedback on this was like, at the end of the day, a lot of these campaigns like do require like money and a backer to get distribution out in the world. Like billboards cost money, that's true. But there's a ton that we could do that's not like paid billboards out in the world, just like spread ideas out like wildfire throughout social media. And if ideas are really good, we could even find money and backers that would be willing to get behind it and put some real resource behind. And I think it's up to us. Like, oh, John, you have your hand up, so let's go.
I would just say quickly, in referencing something that Eric said in the Discord, on the document, one of the comments is that, there's some of these policy projects that are already existing, like the P2P one that he mentions on the document, that are just kind of like not so nice to look at. And if the bar for design is raised on those individual projects that are already existing, then, it might, because like for someone like me to say, oh, I'm gonna start to try to push policy in like a certain area, that might be okay, that's a little bit too much. But as a designer, I know I can contribute to what people are doing and help power them more and come up with marketing campaigns and stuff for that. I think you can see it a lot in politics, how they've used design and do research and stuff like that to do marketing campaigns and stuff, which are relatively cheap, stuff that's happening in the US on social networks and stuff like that. So yeah, I think tacking on to projects and initiatives is
100%. 100% agree. Okay, we're just beyond time. I'm going to try to quickly wrap up now. So again, like this is the kind of, I think branding also has a general bucket where we could take on more generic branding work that would be impactful kind of like in this horizontal way. And there's a couple of product design projects also mentioned in this initiative list. One of them is inheritance. And so we could do work to communicate best practices for inheritance planning, work with existing providers on interoperability, should include best practices on Frost, Taproot, and private collaborative custody. So Chris mentioned there's been a bunch of work that's taken place already here in the design community, and I was speaking with Connor about it, and like I think it's been taken to a certain point, and I think there's a lot that still remains to be done. And so this is about kind of taking the baton and carrying this work forward, and as a custody project. And the next one is also about kind of multi-party custody, but like I felt like it's important as a design community to be thinking about custody to some degree. I mean, it should be part of our list, not necessarily the central focus, because there's lots to do with Bitcoin adoption in general. But we have a couple of custody projects here at the end that I think are worthy of more design thinking. The last one here is multi-party self-custody. Just quickly run through it. We should be designing the user experience for multi-party self-custody. Examples can include small nonprofits, wallets, to a small business, to a country strategic reserve. So small to big, like we need to create solutions where it's not just one person in these entities that are controlling the keys. So how does that work? How do we maximize coin security, personal safety, minimize fraud, transparency, transfer of power, as like one set of leaders rolls in and another comes in, like how does that happen? It's a tremendously big problem. Mo, you pointed out in the document, we should be thinking about this like with a very kind of like global perspective, not just English. So 100% agree, seems very important, right, for good UX thinking to light the way forward, and then adoption to follow behind that. So that's the big list. I just want to kind of very quickly touch on next steps. So what's going to happen from here? So there's already been a lot of feedback on the document that I've tried to think about and communicate here. There's been some good discussion today. If you have follow-on thinking, what I'm going to do is I'll publish this deck. There's follow-on thinking. Please continue to share it in the Discord. But the hope is to publish this list in an appropriate way in the next week or so. Before Christmas, we'd like to have this list of initiatives out, hopefully in a blog post from the design community, have this content on the website, start some outreach then early next year to designers, to wallets, companies, start to get out into the world to talk about this, make more noise in the public, and in so doing, draw people towards the community, get more contributors, and at the end of the day, hopefully have more designers that are contributing, and to have more designers funded to do this work. Because I also want to communicate this, if it's not clear to people today, but there is grant funding available from Spiral for design work. We want to see a lot of designers coming into the community doing this high impact work. And so part of putting these projects out there is almost kind of like a wish list of things that we want to see, that we know to be impactful and needs bodies, needs energy. So let's go. So I just want to kind of quickly look at your comments here. Defining what custody actually means is important here too, because if you could have people saying something is self-custody, but it's actually you giving up your keys, right? So thinking about the language around trust model, custodial versus custodial, like that's a super important question. Yeah. Cool. Is there a hand going up? Oh, I think we're at the end. Yeah, I have a next step here to have an amazing 2026. Yeah, that's the final next step. Have a great year, everybody.
Have an amazing yeah, indeed. Wrap up 2025 with a big celebration. Yeah.
I wanted to say thank you to everybody for joining this call. For me, it was early. For some of you, it was late. We had 15 people. So there hasn't been a community call in a long time in the design community. It was fun to have one. It was fun to think ahead with the whole community. I look forward to personally be involved in some of these projects, not all of them, obviously, but I can already sense a lot of energy from everybody kind of getting their hands in the mix to help lead the charge on all of this stuff next year. Can't wait. Appreciate you all. Have a great day, and see ya.
See everyone.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. See you in Discord.
Cheers.
See you in Discord.